My name is Emily Sibeli. I'm a postdoctoral researcher here in linguistics, and today I'm going to talk to you about the hidden signal in speech. It can be difficult for us to directly observe the workings of the brain. So when we want to learn something about the mind, we often turn to overt behaviors instead to give us a peek under the surface. I think many of us have the intuition that language is one of those things that can tell us about the minds of others. Their words can give us insight into their thoughts, their emotions, maybe even something about their health. As a phonetician, that's a type of linguist that studies speech, I'm interested in what I can learn about your mind, not by studying the words you use, but the way that you say those words, the way that you pronounce them, the way that you time your speech, the melody of your voice. Today, I'm going to argue that we can learn a lot about mental health by studying the way that people speak. And I'll give you some evidence that we might even be able to improve health outcomes for people with serious mental health disorders like psychosis by studying the speech signal. Now, before we get to how speech can do this, let's take a moment to talk about mental health. Psychotic disorders are mental health disorders that are characterized by symptoms like hallucinations, delusions, disordered thoughts, and social impairment. The most common of these is schizophrenia, which affects 1 in 100 people worldwide. In the United States, nearly 2.5 million individuals have a schizophrenia diagnosis, and the impacts of these disorders can be devastating. Nearly 1 in 3 homeless individuals in the US has schizophrenia. Tragically, nearly half of people with the diagnosis attempt suicide at some point in their lives. And the public healthcare costs are substantial, second only to Alzheimer's disease for the amount of money per patient we spend every year, and accounting for nearly 2% of the annual healthcare budget in the country. So clearly, both the personal and societal impacts are enormous. And right now, we don't know how to cure these disorders. It is the case that early intervention could substantially improve individuals' health outcomes, especially those at risk for psychosis. But right now, we also don't have a good biological test telling us who's most likely to get these disorders. Fortunately, we do have some clues from behavior. We know that individuals at risk for psychosis start to experience subtle hallucinations and delusions in early adulthood. We know they may struggle with their personal relationships and socially withdraw. And interestingly, we also observe disruptions to their motor control, affecting their posture, their limbs, and the way they move their faces, heads, and hands. Now, these signs are crucial for us because they're measurable and quantifiable, which gives us an objective standard to test for psychosis risk. But there's a problem with these measures as well. Right now, they require fairly specialized technology that can't be easily used with the general population. And that's a problem for disorders as widespread as schizophrenia. So if we want to make use of these insights for motor control, we need some other way to find them. And that is where speech comes in. Let's take a moment to talk about what a complex motor behavior speech really is. It feels pretty simple to us, but it actually requires this rapid, coordinated dance of vocal articulators like the lips, the tongue, the jaw, and the larynx, or vocal folds. We're about to watch a video of somebody speaking normally while in an MRI, and I want you to pay attention to just 2 things: how often the lips are closing, and how often the tongue tip is moving up to the roof of the mouth. As a matter of fact, in just 10 seconds of speech here, we get 13 lip closures, 22 tongue tip movements, and lots of other tongue movement as well, and vibration of the larynx somewhere between 80 and 250 times per second. Now, as I said, this generally feels effortless, but you can see there's quite a bit of movement that requires quite a bit of coordination. And we know this to be true because we can observe speech in individuals with diseases like Parkinson's disease, which affect the motor system, and observe that when motor control breaks down, speech breaks down as well. Furthermore, we can take a look at the acoustic signal that results when a person speaks and mine it for certain clues in that signal, like the length of consonants, or the duration of pauses, or properties about vowel pronunciation that might also signal to us that something is going wrong. So, if we know that speech is this complex motor behavior, and we know that psychosis impacts motor control, What if we could use speech as an early warning system for psychosis risk? That's what my work aims to determine. And we can pull these acoustic signals from speech from almost any source, from a conversation, from reading out loud, even from a recording like a voicemail, and mine it for these cues that something might be going wrong. For example, we've taken recorded interviews with adolescents at risk for psychosis and just asked, how long does it take them to answer a question when it's asked of them? And it turns out they pause for a lot longer before responding than their healthy peers. And this distinction is particularly strong for those at-risk speakers experiencing the most severe symptoms of hallucinations and delusions, those really hallmark symptoms of psychosis. Now, you might wonder, could this difference just be due to the fact that the at-risk speakers might have more to say? Maybe they're planning more, and that's why it takes them longer to respond. And that is true to some extent. But interestingly, we also see this difference when we ask our speakers to just read out loud from a script we've given them. So they're not planning what they have to say in this case, and we still observe this pause difference, suggesting to us that there's something more fundamental about the link between psychosis symptoms and speech motor control. We can look at even finer-grained details. For example, in our at-risk speakers, we've observed that those experiencing the most severe social withdrawal tend to produce the most vowel overlap in their speech. So when I talk about vowel overlap, what I'm talking about is two words that are distinguished only by their vowels, coming to sound a little bit more like one another than we would typically expect. So the difference between pin and pen, or boat and boot, or horse and hearse. These words end up sounding a little bit more like one another than is typical. Now, the difference between each of these word pairs is determined by positions of the tongue in the mouth that differ on the order of just millimeters. So if somebody has some abnormality in speech motor control, that's going to affect their ability to position their tongue in their mouth and make these pronunciation differences. These are the types of signs that are getting us closer to an early warning detection system for psychosis that's cheap, relatively easy to implement, and most importantly, can be used in a widespread way with the general population without the need for specialized technology. One day, it might be possible for us to screen for psychosis risk using nothing more complex than the device we carry around in our pockets every day. Thank you.